What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fourth album by rap duo Outkast. Basically, this project is called Stankonia and it came out in the fall of the year 2000. The thing about this particular project is this is kind of seen as Outkast's breakout album back in the fall of 2000 pitches like that. It crested into early 2001, some of those type pitches, and they eventually dropped their album after that in late 2001, which I think is called, I forget what it was called, it was like Outkast. I reviewed it back in April. It was Big Boy and Dre present Outkast. Reviewed that back in April. It was a pretty good pitch. I want to say I give that album like a 10 out of 10. Definitely had a good collection of Outkast songs. So there are definitely some classics, definitely some poignant and classic type songs to kind of get, especially in Southern hip hop as far as that pitch can happen. But this is a particular album. This is one of the ones that was seen as like their more breakthrough where they started to get singles that started to hit like #1 and top 10, top 15 on like the Billboard as far as that pitch can happen. I do ultimately feel like this album's a little bit underhanded. I feel like the praise that this album particularly got, it was a big deal for Southern hip hop around that time, but I do think maybe it's just a single shy of being like a true full blown classic. Like there's some places like Rolling Stone or AllMusic.com that would give this particular album like a 5 star out of 5. I want to say maybe even Hip Hop Deluxe, some of those particular type places. But I kind of look after it. It is definitely a good album, but in terms of like the sheer back to back bops on here, I feel like the 3 singles were mostly this is kind of more of like a 2 single album, which was more just Miss Jackson and So Fresh, So Clean. Because I feel like because Bombs Over Baghdad was kind of like a more promo type single. It was a buzz single. It did relatively decent, but it was kind of the easily like that was the more underhanded one out of the 3 singles on there. It just needed one more hit to kind of consolidate things. They followed it up pretty quickly with like The Whole World from late 2001s. That crested by the time they basically took like 5, 6, 7, 8 months off between like the hit appeal So Fresh, So Clean to like the fall 2001 pitch of like The Whole World as far as that pitch kind of went. But I still feel like this album needed at least one more hit. At least Eminem, when he dropped the Marshall Mathers LP in the year 2000, had, despite the fact that that album only had 3 singles, I kind of feel like it at least had like some follow up type ones. Because I do want to say that Bitch Please 2 was also a single as far as that particular kind of went, in addition to Stan, Way I Am, and Real Slim Shady. So it's just kind of comes, just probably need at least one more to kind of have. But this, like I was saying, this is a good album. I don't view it as like a full blown classic, but I would have to say it's definitely an above average, and especially for like the year 2000 when things were just more stark and just differential around that particular time. There's still folks that were still kind of sold on Puff Daddy and DMX and more East Coast hip hop, Mace, some of those type people, Cameron, some of those type folks. 2000, really out of the year 2000, for the most part, the folks that were kind of bubbling out of the South was just mainly like Scarface, Mystical, a little bit of Outkast in there, a little bit of Ludacris in there, Masterpiece, some of those type folks that I have to say. But none of these folks really got to like the third, fourth, fifth single just within that full blown type pitch. I'd have to say it was just kind of a different, it was just kind of a different type field as far as that pitch kind of went along with it. But this is, I do think that this is definitely a good album. I do feel like this is a good album to kind of re-dig up and re-fuck with again, because I do feel like songs like Miss Jackson and So Fresh, So Clean are just like classic vintage hits out of the early 2000s as far as that kind of appeal goes along with it. So it had to kind of say and stuff amongst that kind of poignantness as far as that particular kind of happens. But I look after it, I definitely think it does have some good bop. I do feel like some of the production on here, it's not completely by Organized Noise, which I thought it would have been. They're kind of one of their longtime producers. So I want to say they're like an in-house producer from like their label, which I forget what the label of Outcat. I forget what the label of Outkast kind of is. Maybe it's LaFace Records, something like that. But I would just have to say it's a good concept. I mean, this is really like the last taste of Outkast that they dropped in like an original album format where they both were a part of it as a duo, where it's Big Boy and Andre 3000. I'd have to say because basically, the Speaker Box Love Below album was 2 separate albums, one by Big Boy, one by Andre 3000. They kind of did the same thing where they went their separate ways on like Idlewild from 2006. So this pretty much is basically their most recent album in terms of them as a duo, the classic vintage that folks know and love of Outkast as far as the Michigan goes. Now there are at least 3 new songs, unlike the Big Boy and Dre present Outkast from 2001, but this is basically like the most recent full blown album, but the second most recent since 2001 as far as that pitch kind of goes. But at this stage, it's like waiting for molasses. However, that phrase kind of goes, the waiting for molasses line, trying to get new Outcasts as far as that pitch kind of goes. I want to say that their most recent song that has both Andre 3000 and Big Boy on there, it has Andre 3000 and Big Boy on there, would be the song that they did with International Players Anthem with UGK in 2007. That's, to my knowledge, the most recent song that both of them are kind of on. It just is not it's just very unlikely at these particular days. But I would have to say the concept behind it, this is a pretty good album. I feel like it's a pretty balanced and well-rounded type one. But I do feel like it's a single shy. And just with the times, I mean, for 2000, I probably would, if it would have been like 2000, 2001, 2002, I probably would have given this album like a 9 out of 10 or an 8.75, just a relatively higher score. The impact of it is definitely kind of good. It's not going to get like above, I mean, you'll see it's going to get like a balanced score. It's just kind of the concept. I feel like it just was shy, like a good another hook on the verge of like So Fresh, So Clean or Miss Jackson, some of those type pitches, and just ultimately probably needed like one or two more bops on here that could have helped, especially just within the balance of some of the nightclub songs. But it is appealing. It definitely has that Southern Fried type hip hop on here. This is kind of a slummish type album, I'd say, on top of that. We'll get to that. So but yeah, there's basically three singles off this album. Like I was saying, it's pretty balanced as far as that particular pitch kind of went. For the time, Outkast didn't really typically kind of get to the third single, and if they did, these were not full blown kind of singles that were just warranted across like the charts. So I'd say, but B.O.B. is the first single. This is Bombs Over Baghdad. Interesting type pitch to kind of go along. This my kind of has that Politico type fare, which is pretty dope. This is like a jivey kind of outdoor festive song, I'd have to say. This is like some jivey kind of outdoor fest noise, I would have to say. It's like a sports game and rowdy turn up, I would definitely feel like. And this is just a good buzz single. And dap kickoff, I would have to say some dap kickoff fun, I would definitely have to suppose. And this is just a pretty hooky song. So all three of the singles on here have some great hooks on here. They're just recitable pitches like that. This is why I probably feel like this is one of Outkast's most commercial albums, although I do feel like they got more gloss on like their 2003 albums. I still would have to say that this is pretty much like the second largest in terms of the overall appeal that they had. This really some commercial bite that just makes probably a lot of folks wish that we could get another album like this in recent type times. But this is a real great song to hear at like football games and basketball games. Some of those type pitches just out and about, just places like that, I'd have to say. Miss Jackson is the second single, and to my knowledge, this is a song that hit #1. I want to say this was actually a #1 single for the longest time. And this was a #1 single back in the day as far as that pitch count went. It was a big deal around the time when it came out. This has such a recitable hook. This is just a staple out of the 2000s decade. Definitely probably one of the bigger songs out of like the late 90s, early 2000s from rap music. This what I'd say is just recitable. This is the constant staple. Just a beloved type hit. It's like a slummish kind of good evening work shift malaise of a song, and I'd say in particular this really has that slum type feel, just a low key type one, just typical kind of stuff. It's that relative ghetto fabulous type appeal I'd have to say about it. But this does have like a fabulous kind of chorus, I would have to say in particular. It's like a classic Outkast in 2000s hit single. I would definitely have to say it's just an overall charmer. It's just a pretty good aspect to kind of get here. I definitely think Outkast needed to make another song like this. This is the same sort of sleaze, and malaise that this particular song kind of has, but just a different junction and different topic as far as that pitch kind of goes. I just say it'd be a good concept to kind of see that in particular. I mean, Andre 3000 really nailed this particular hook on here. This is the sort of stuff. I mean, Andre 3000 was pretty stellar at doing hooks around this particular time. It's just interesting some of these ones that he cooked up around this particular around these times as far as that kind of went, because you know he did that with The Whole World, he did that with Roses, he did that with Hey Y'all, some of those type ones. I'd have to say this is kind of the concept that I feel like he kind of missed like his sweet spot of just doing songs like this. It would have been interesting to have seen him do a few more like these, just because I don't know if he did this with albums like Idlewild and some of those type pitches. I really don't remember Idlewild having that many hits. Like from what I remember, the singles they just didn't chart that heavily. But between like 2000 and 2004, Andre 3000 was just cranking out these hooks and hits just left and right. A lot of these were pretty recitable. It's a pretty nice one. So Fresh, So Clean is the third single. There definitely need to be another song like this. This is produced by Organized Noise, which is a pretty good pitch. This is the only one. This is one of 3 productions they have on here. It's definitely a pretty nice one. Just has a real jazzy and overall minty type feel about this. This is a jazzy and kind of minty club hitter, I would have to say in particular. This is like another superb chorus that this song particularly kind of has in Gleam. It definitely has in particular. It has another superb chorus in Gleam overall, I would have to say about this song. And this is just an easy social kind of zone out type song. So this is just a real nice bopper to kind of have around these points. Just being able to say some of those. This is definitely one of the bigger rap albums out of the year 2000. I'd have to say in particular, if you weren't listening to Eminem, there's a pretty good chance you were listening to this album or Ludacris, some of those type ones, at least in terms of like the social appeal. If you were 25 or just going to nightclubs and pitches like that, just socialize some of those type pitches. This is definitely a pretty minty club hitter, I'd have to say in particular. Just the chorus on So Fresh, So Clean is just very jazzy, and this has the pizzazz about it. This affable type one, this real butter smooth type one to kind of get in particular. I would have to say this really has that appeal. And this is a good look for this particular album. I definitely think if they had had a 4th single like this, just the way that Ludacris kind of packed his album with 4 singles on word of mouth, I think this probably would have been more of like a full-blown classic. I want to say this album went at least 2, 3, 4 times platinum, something like that. Probably mainly because of Miss Jackson and So Fresh, So Clean. But I would have to say it's just the concept of this is pretty. This is a better look than it isn't, I would have to say. Just it's possibly a little bit milder than it needed to be in terms of promotion, but. So yeah, there's a lot of skits on this particular album. On the standard edition, when you buy the CD and stuff, there's 24 songs on here, but minus like all the skits and interludes and things like that, it narrows it down to 15. So there's 9 of them. I would have to say out of the 15 songs that are on this particular album that are actually songs, I'm not going to count Question Mark just because that's more like a skit type songs. There's actually like 7 or 8 Not counting the intro, there's like 7 interludes on here. The intro is the 8th interlude, and then the question mark song is just like the 9th interlude, I'd have to say. But out of the 15 songs on this album that are songs, I wound up recommending to you 10. So that's basically 2/3 of the particular project. So it's going to get higher than a 6 out of 10, but I still would have to say. So the 10 songs I recommend out of 15 would be Bombs Over Baghdad, Miss Jackson, So Fresh, So Clean, Spaghetti Junction, I'll Call Before I Come, Explosion, We Love These Hoes, Gangsta Shit, Slum Beautiful, and Gasoline Dreams. So basically, the concept about some of these, another organized noise production on here would be Spaghetti Junction. This is a real nice one. This is like a good malaise kind of evening work shift of a song, I'd have to say. It's a pretty good combo with Miss Jackson. I would definitely feel like it's a little bit more straightforward than that particular song. Not quite as jazzy, not quite as rambunctious, and just overall more sparkly just within the appeal behind it. It's just more straightforward, and it's just kind of more straightforward type dredge, I'd say. So it's a little bit more of like an album type cut, just something you'd listen to on a more plain type day. Just the aspect of just not as spiffy just within the tone of it, I'd have to say, but it is some good malaise to kind of get for some of that. Just the appeal, like some low-key kind of slumish type feelings, I'd have to suppose. Do appreciate the concept. It's pretty good malaise type production on there. A surprise hit song on here was Explosion with Be Real. This is a real nice one. It's like a fancier and kind of darker fraternized noise, I'd have to say in particular. It's like a great hotbox the whip type tune, and I would definitely feel like this is some good evening turn up. Pretty good for that in particular, and this is just an overall shrill type song. So this feels like this could have been a song on like a Cypress Hill album. Definitely something in like the more chandelier and kind of just more graceful type moments and like a more Dracula type sense and just darker type tone. It's just interesting kind of get this because this is almost pseudo like horrorcore type tone. This really feels like something out of October. I mean, this particular album, Stankonia, came out on Halloween, but this is really not much of like an autumn album. I mean, it has some autumn malaise on here in like a certain sense, but it really doesn't go into like spooky and kind of gothic type territory. But I feel like one that at least somewhat does is Explosion. Probably one of the few ones that does that. But it really has a pretty fancy and dark type beat that works extremely well. Pretty good turn up song that's good with Bombs Over Baghdad, I would have to say, would be Gasoline Dreams. It's like a good summary backyard and outdoor hangout mess of a song, I'd have to say in particular. It's like some social smoke something type tunes to kind of get in particular, I would have to say, and this is like some good unwind time. So I definitely feel like about this one. This is kind of a rock, this is kind of like a rock rap type one to kind of get here. Just a good particular pitch behind this, some revved up typeness. Appreciate the appeal behind it. This one works pretty well. This is like some outdoor. There are some songs in this particular album that have some of that outdoor type fare. It's an interesting concept, kind of get some of this. It's more backyard type appeal and pitches like that. Just outdoor smoke sessions, just kicking it outside pitches like that. It's not quite as residential as far as just going to talk about some of those type pitches, but just the concept of just maybe grilling burgers, some of those type pitches, just outdoor type fare where there's going to be smoke in the air, some of those type things. Just good for like autumn weather, football season, some of that type stuff. Pretty good appealing one that has some similarities to Miss Jackson, I'd have to say, is Slum Beautiful. Do appreciate this one. It's like a woozing kind of slumish cousin of Miss Jackson, I would definitely have to say. It's the same evening makeshift drew about that particular song, just a little bit more malaise about it, and this is just a nice album cut. So this one, We Love These Hoes, is a basic kind of vanilla low-key day of a song, I'd have to say. Pretty good concept of that. Just a basic kind of plain type day in particular. It's just this kind of in-between type song. I would definitely feel like this is like a freaky deaky kind of mellow commotion of a song, I'd have to say in particular. Relatively, I would say this is like an offhanded bop for chicas, I would have to say in particular. So it's just kind of a concept like Ludacris kind of did a song like this, although it's not quite as like Latin tinge as like the song that Ludacris did with like that R&B group, I forget who they're called, but Freaky Things off of Word of Mouth, some of those type pitches, just kind of an in-between type day to some pitches like that, just motel type music and standard house party type fare, basic kind of vanilla type bop, just kind of get in like just a relatively pedestrian type fashion, I'd say about this. The bopish type one, just really kind of breezy, just appreciate the pitch behind it. It's produced by Organized Noise. That's a pretty good concept. Another one like that would be I'll Call Before I Come. This has Gangsta Boo on there and a chick named Echo or Eco, something like that. Pretty good concept for that one. Interesting pitch to kind of have Gangsta Boo on here. The thing about this particular album is it has some folks on here that just are offhanded with the approach. This is kind of low-key and just overall just kind of off the wall as to how some of these folks on here are. Like, I wasn't expecting Outkast to do a song with Be Real from Cypress Hill. Same thing with Gangsta Boo, her being on here around this particular time. Killer Mike is on here on one of his earlier type days. I mean, he was more affiliated with Outkast, but it's this kind of concept. Too bad I don't recommend that song. There's just some ones on here. Erykah Badu is on here. It's too bad, once again, I don't recommend that song either. But anyhow, I'll Call Before I Come is a nice one. It's like a stylish and kind of plush in between, I would have to say. Just a good house party kickoff. I would definitely feel like it's like a basic kind of low-key ladies noise of a song. Definitely feel like about that one. This is kind of like a simp hit, I would have to say. Just a basic simp type song to kind of get here. Just some breezy type after effect. There's just some good house party songs to kind of get on here. This is basically more of like a residential type fare. I mean, in terms of songs like So Fresh, So Clean, I feel like the only real song that comes close to that in terms of like nightclub type appeal, I'd probably say would just be B.O.B. and possibly like Explosion as far as that pitch kind of happens. For the most part, a lot of this is just more around the house, just kind of residential, just kind of localized type fare, just the concept of backyard, just house party, and just call up the homies type sessions, get some things started as far as that pitch kind of goes. But I'll call before I come is like a good local ladies bop as far as that pitch kind of goes. Just good concept. Oh yeah, I would say Gangsta Shit's a pretty nice one. This is like a gnarled kind of outdoor turn up of a song. I would definitely have to say it's like a good pairing with B.O.B. and Gasoline Dreams. I would definitely have to say same sort of backyard kickback as far as that pitch can goes. Just some heavy smoke and food type sessions. Definitely some good barbecue type music, getting some snackage, getting like pizzas and burgers and Burger King, some of those type pitches, Popeyes, some of that type pitch as far as that particular kind of goes. Just heavy smoke, definitely get some blunts in rotation, some of that type pitch. Just good late summer, autumn type fare as far as that would kind of happen. Just really like the appeal of some of these. So it's a good concept kind of get some of these moments. You have some of these house party type moments for the ladies on here, like Miss Jackson, I'll Call Before I Come, and We Love These Hoes. Then you get like a trilogy or a trifecta of songs in the same pitch of kind of like backyard type fare, like Gasoline Dreams, Gangsta Shit, and B.O.B. I'd have to say in particular, just some outdoor type fare. It's too bad that there aren't more songs like So Fresh, So Clean on here and like a nightclub sense. I'd have to say in particular, that would have been a good follow up to kind of have gotten some more of those. But it's just a pretty good pitch. So that's the 10 songs I recommend on here. In terms of the 5 songs I don't recommend, some of these type ones, like I feel like Red Velvet and Toilet Tissue were just some ones. I feel like Red Velvet was just kind of a poor R&B type song that just didn't pull out the vibes that well. That one probably needed a little bit better arrangements. It just was kind of messy in like the second half of the song, and I'd say just didn't really appreciate the more kind of rambunctious and just kind of randomized type format of that particular song. Toilet Tissue was just kind of more of like a skit type song. It's just kind of the concept. It's about like a teenage girl that commits suicide, some pitches like that. But it's just kind of the concept of just looking after it. I mean, it has like a dark tone just within the pitch of how it particularly kind of happens. But it's just kind of the song amalgamation as to how this particular song is portrayed is just not as effective as it needs to be. I probably would have liked the standard verses and rap verses on it. Pretty similar. I say probably should have been more similar to like Eminem's Stand, some of those type pitches. Just a more storytelling type concept. I mean, I like that Big Boy talked at the end of the song, but it just didn't. Effectiveness was just not as abrasive as it needed to be. Stankonia, Stank Love was just kind of a poor type one. Didn't really appreciate the arrangements. That was kind of a lengthier type song. Just didn't really. I mean, it had Sleepy Brown on there and Big Roo, but this was kind of a more clumsy approach as to how that one particularly kind of happened. Humble Mumble with Erica Badu is just another one that just didn't really have the appeal. I mean, some of these type ones that were just more kind of down low ladies bound just within the pitch of just kind of being more low key and stuff. Red Velvet, Humble Mumble, some of those type ones just didn't really have the appeal that they relatively needed to. But like some of these boppish type ones, like We Love These Hoes and I'll Call Before I Come, just nailed it better. But in terms of getting like a rap ballad type tune just for like a more down low kind of this heavy boo booed up type fare, just didn't really nail it quite as well. I mean, Miss Jackson was somewhat of that, but that one was just a better bop and just obviously had the better hook. But and then of course, Snapping and Trapping was just a poor type one. Really didn't appreciate the production at all of this particular one. It's kind of a waste of a Killer Mike type feature as far as that pitch kind of happened with it. It was just kind of one. I was expecting like a better song from this particular amalgamation, but it just I think it was trying to be like a warped and heavy distorted type one, just like for some smokage or just hangout type fare that just kind of had like some good ritziness about it, but it just didn't really pull out the vibes at all. It just was not a very pleasing type song to listen to. It just didn't really nail it. So that's the concept. So basically, so me recommending 10 songs out of 15 on this particular album, I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 7.75 out of 10. Like, once again, I feel like if this had just had one more single, I probably would give it like an 8 or an 8.25. I feel like 10 out of 15 is pretty good, even though that's 2/3, and you would think that that would be like a 6.5 out of 10, something within that pitch. But it does have a number 1 on here, and it does have some pretty balanced songs. I definitely feel like all 3 of the singles do an excellent job as far as that pitch kind of happens with it. It does have some good outdoor fest type songs. This is a pretty social. I'd say that the social score is probably going to get a lot higher of a score. I mean, I do feel like it has. I mean, to have 10 good songs out of 15 is definitely a pretty good pitch. That's more than a few just to be able to say that this is not a bad album. I probably would have ranked it higher had I reviewed this album years before, back when the impact was still more large, just within the aspect of how it particularly kind of happened. It was just kind of, in nowadays times, as far as it standing the test of time, I think that 3 singles, especially when only 2 singles, which was just Miss Jackson and So Fresh, So Clean, really did the most part of the damage as far as that pitch kind of went along with it. It just didn't really it doesn't stand up quite as well as it did back in the day. I mean, I feel like this had some glossary of appeal, definitely had commercial aspects that put Outkast into like the spotlight and got them like the vivid kind of snazz of just mainstream stuff like that. But There was just kind of a number of things that had some backlash about it. Just the fact that they never did another album together, just with songs together like this particular album. They kind of went their separate ways after this particular album, and the Big Boy and Dre Present Outkast album from 2001. I mean, I would have to say this album was a big deal for 2000, 2001. It was definitely kind of a beaming quality that just had a lot of good aspects as far as being able to put them into the spotlight. But I just think the stardom kind of affected them as far as like this, the differences that kind of went on and the disgruntledness or whatever that kind of happened that led to the dissolution, which there's some good moments on here, but I think it's kind of short a single and just maybe short like another hooks and pitches like that. I mean, these songs are good. These 10 songs are good, but they're just kind of more in like hardcore type territory as far as that pitch kind of goes. Like when you think of Eminem's Marshall Mathers LP and pitches like that, it had extra songs on there that besides the singles that were casual and pitches like that, like I would say like Drug Ballad and like Bitch Please too, and some of those type ones, and Kim, and some of those type ones in particular, just an extra kind of bounty of songs. Like I feel like the casual score is probably like, I don't know, I'm kind of on the, like I do feel like there's some good social moments in here, but in terms of like moments that would not just be seen in like hardcore rap, or just you have to be like more than just an average fan that some of these to appreciate. I kind of feel like it's here and there, but we'll just go to the social score. So I would say about the social score, I kind of feel like maybe the social score would be like an 8.25 out of 10, because I feel like these songs are good. There's kind of a mosquito in here, so I'm trying to get this review done quickly. But basically, there's some songs on here for backyard type sessions like Gangsta Shit and Gasoline Dreams and some of those type ones, and like B.O.B., some of those type pitches, but it's kind of lacking in like a nightclub song like So Fresh, So Clean, some of those type pitches. I feel like another hit like Miss Jackson would have been pretty necessary as well. I mean, I feel like this is a good enough album, has that social bounty about what kind of happens with it, but for some strange reason, it's just not a home run. I kind of look at it. It's not to say this is a bad album. It's packed. It does have a good assortment of songs. You know, some ladies songs on here, some residential type fare, like some good backyard bubblers as far as that pitch can happen. But in terms of like another smash, like I feel like that despite all this casual, despite some of the social type appeal of it, you have to kind of know about it more, or at least be more willing to know about it in terms of just besides like the two megaton hits which would be basically Miss Jackson and So Fresh So Clean. But I do feel like B.O.B. is an extra type one that's somewhat within the valve of that. So I would give it an 8.25 social, higher than the score of this album, just because it does have the hits on here, but it's just kind of more. It's not necessarily hardcore, but just kind of more in like a more, you have to be willing just within the concept of a territory. So that kind of happens to be a thing. In terms of the future, like Outkast has not dropped an album since 2006, and it seems less likely that they ever will. Like Big Boy's at least dropped albums in like the early 2010s. I don't know the last album he dropped, maybe 2015, 2014, some pitch like that. But he's at least put out albums recently, somewhat recently, I'd have to say. But Andre 3000 has been gone since 2006, and I really don't. I mean, he sometimes drops like songs or singles, pitches like that, and I don't mean his own singles, but features on songs. It's not very frequently. He's one of the more elusive rap artists out there, so it's this kind of concept. But this is pretty much their most recent album in terms of what they did, terms of the impact of just being the collab duo that you knew from 1994, 1997, pitches like that. It's a good concept. This is a balanced album. I would definitely have to say it's a little bit underhanded in terms of casual and mainstream type appeal, but it's a good look for the year 2000, early 2000s, and it does have some inescapable hits on here.